topic is bioremediation by green nanotechnology. This term bioremediation represents biology to the rescue. It sounds like a snazzy idea, but it has been around ever since there has been life on Earth. If it were not for bioremediation, we'd all be sitting on mountains of dinosaur poop right now, at this very minute. Mother Nature's little helpers are cleaning up after dead and decaying plants and animals, natural phenomena like volcanoes, fires, and earthquakes. So, without people, Earth is perfectly capable of healing itself over time. But the tipping point is we are overwhelming nature's capacity to bioremediate itself. If only we would put a continent or two aside for a millennium or two, then it would be just fine to bioremediate. But that is not really happening. In many cases, we have ruined the environment with good intentions. Let's take the example of DDT, dichloro trichloroethylene. Paul Hermann Muller received his Nobel Prize in 1948 for DDT. This pesticide has a huge impact on public health by bringing down incidence of malaria and cholera globally. But just 15 years later, in its simple book, Silent Spring, I do remember, Raquel Carson reported that uh, to discriminate spraying of supposedly beneficial chemicals was hurting the environment. And DDT was that poisoning what the songbirds and the spring season was all silenced. So in a few years, it was added as a few oxygenate to gasoline so as to mitigate air pollution. And indeed, it helped to clean the air quality, but ended up contaminating our water resources. What can we do to care for our environment sustainably? And that's where bioremediation comes in. We can help nature clean up himself faster and naturally. It's more important than ever to research ways to protect our society and our children's future, who our next generation against these poisons, what we are ourselves putting in the environment. Every food wave and every food chain on earth begins with bacteria. They have crucial roles in producing food, decomposing waste, and performing many ecosystem services. Without them, I think we won't be able to eat, breathe, or live. They are invisible, but they are found everywhere on the planet, even on human bodies. Healthy human bodies have more microbes than human cells, and that is our personal microbiome. Sometimes we bring the environment into the lab, study what works out on there, and refine the solutions. Or we develop a technology in the lab first and then test it out in the real world. So all this is a encapsulation of bioremediation. What I want to convey in this uh, FTP, in my part, that we all must have to uh, indulge in various ways so that our mother earth can bioremediate herself naturally in economical ways and in a faster way. Okay, let's now see what are the outlines of today's lecture. Introduction. Nanotechnology in background. Nanotechnology, bioremediation. Role of biotechnology in bioremediation. Biosynthesis of bio-nanoparticles. Nanobioremediation. Environmentally remediation by carbon nanotubes. Use of carbon nanoparticles in bioremediation. Future prospects. And the last but not the least is the conclusion. So these are the outlines of today's talk. Now, next coming to uh, this is the map of our world, which shows the pollution density in various parts. Pollution of the environment keeps on increasing at an alarming rate due to the activities of man, such as urbanization, technological advancement, unsafe agricultural practices, and rapid industrialization, which degrades the environment. Faced with the problem of environmental pollution that grows day by day, bioremediation becomes an alternative strategy to control the destruction of biodiversity. Numerous methods have been used for this control and technological advancement, among which nanobiotechnology has stood out as a promising alternative in the remediation of pollutants. Currently, the pollutants of concern include hydrocarbons, heavy metals, drugs, pesticides, and explosives. The effects of these pollutants can give a serious threat to human health and ecosystem. It is, I want to say that it is giving a serious threat to human health and ecosystem. Next, coming, due to all these reasons, we have an immediate requirement for what? For a new technology, which will help to heal our Mother Earth in a faster way. Previously, many traditional physicochemical techniques were there, which includes precipitation, electrochemical treatment, electrocoagulation, and adsorption, which were practiced. Now, these methods are also practiced, but these methods, reproducibility is questionable, and they took a lot of time. Prolonged exposure may cause the development of mutagens and carcinogens, which break down slowly and remain in the environment for long periods. Among these pollutants, contamination of soils, residue, surface water, and air with hazardous materials like petroleum is a major problem which the world is facing in a recent issue. Although many conventional physicochemical techniques are there, there is still an immediate requirement for the improvement of unique, effective, eco-friendly, and cost-effective approach for the remediation of environmental contaminants. Okay, now let me tell you a story. Okay, after so much of learning of 4 days of FDP, I just want a soothing talk today. Look, I'm telling you a story. You all may have known this. This is the story of an elephant and an ant. Okay. Once upon a time in a forest, there lived many wild animals. In this jungle, there also lived a big elephant who used to irritate and underestimate all other small animals. Inside a deep hole, there lived a tiny ant family. Every morning, they would go in search of food. On their way, they would meet the elephant. One day, when the ant family was off to work, the elephant sprayed a trunk full of water on them. The ant said, "Ouch, you should not hurt others like this." The elephant said angrily, "Oh, you stupid ant, keep quiet, or I will crush you to death." The poor ant was restless, but he kept quiet and they decided to teach the proud elephant a lesson. Then the time come when the elephant was sleeping near the tree, and the ant slowly crept into the elephant's trunk and started biting him. The elephant became restless. He tried to get ant out of his trunk, but the ant did not come out. The elephant shouted in pain, but the ant kept biting him. The elephant started to cry and said sorry to the tiny ant. The moral of the story is we should never underestimate. We shouldn't say that this is a small thing, what can it do? No. Small things can do even wonders. So the ants may be tiny, but they can bring a giant elephant down to his knees. So what are those tiny things by which we can manage such a giant problem, pollution? These tiny things are nanomaterials. Directly can clean hazardous waste sites, desalinate water, treat pollutants, or sense and monitor environmental pollutants, along with another tiny thing, microorganisms. Next coming to nanomaterials, what are they? These nanomaterials are mainly characterized by their tiny size, measured in nanometers. A nanometer is 1 millionth of a millimeter, as you all must know, must be having the knowledge in this 4D ZDP, which is approximately 10 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. So how small they are. These nano-sized particles exist in nature and can be created from a variety of products, such as carbon or minerals like silver. But nanomaterials by definition must have at least one dimension that is less than approximately 100 nanometers. And these most nanoscale materials are too small to be seen with the naked eye, even with the conventional lab microscopes. So in this picture, we can see how small are nanomaterials. You can think of that. They are 1 lakh times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. So next, coming to nanotechnology. In general, it is an emerging field to produce nanoscale products with more efficient reactivity and larger surface area than in the bulk phase. These unique attributes of nanoparticles offer immense potential for their application to clean up petroleum hydrocarbons, pesticides, and metal contaminated sites. In recent years, the green processes for the synthesis of various nanoparticles have evolved into an important branch of nanotechnology and has created a substantial interest in the areas of chemical, electronic, and biological sciences. Nanotechnology presents a number of potential environmental benefits, which could be divided into three categories: treatment and remediation, sensing detection, pollution prevention, and specific nanotechnologies discussed here mainly focus on bioremediation in various fields. So we'll discuss today nanotechnology related with bioremediation. Next is green nanotechnology, what it is. It provides the tools for the transformation of biological systems to green approaches to nanomaterial synthesis. As it is termed as green, so we can say it is environmental friendly and developed and used in such a way that it doesn't disturb our environment and conserves the natural resources. It is also known as clean technology. So, due to the large number of toxic chemicals and extreme environments employed in the physicochemical production of these nanoparticles, green methods are employed as the use of biological sources. Through integrating the principles of green chemistry and engineering, green nanotechnology can produce safe and eco-friendly metal nanoparticles that do not use toxic chemicals in their synthesis. Generally, The main role of natural plant biomolecules involved with the bioreduction of metal salts during nanoparticle preparation. So what is the advantage in it that so when we are going to apply those products in our environment, apart from bioremediating or apart from cleaning our environment, it should not substantially exert any kind of what can I say, any kind of bad effect. So these are all applications of nanotechnology. The average person already encounters nanotechnology in range of everyday consumer products. Nanoparticles of silver are used to deliver antimicrobial properties in hand washes, bandages, socks, and all these things. So nanotechnology is widely circulated in a variety of applications. Next, coming to the advantages of nanotechnology. These are all advantages of nanotechnology. So which helps and capable of monitoring, recognizing, treating such a small amount of contaminants in air, water, and soil. There is a need for technology that can sense, reduce, prevent, and treat environment contaminations. This also allows designing and manipulating materials at the atomic and molecular level. The small size of nanoparticles together with their high surface tension ratio can lead to very sensitive detections. Next, coming to bioremediation. It is a technique used to remove environmental contaminants from the ecosystem. What the term is bio meaning life and remediate meaning restoring balance. It is a waste management technique that includes the use of living organisms to eradicate or neutralize pollutants from a contaminated site. So it mainly works in two ways. One, in one case, microbes eat and digest organic substances as their food for nutrients and energy. So when microbes completely digest chemicals, they change them into water and harmless gases with an end product of clean soil, carbon dioxide, water, and cell material. In another case, these microbes degrade hazardous organic substances into inert products. Next, coming to nanotechnology in bioremediation. What is the utility here? The utility lies in its specific characteristics like high surface to volume ratio, enhanced magnetic and catalytic properties that make these nanoparticles more worthwhile than their mass phase counterparts in the field of remediation technology. Distinctive subordinate properties of nanoparticles frequently exist, which are predominantly due to their high surface to volume ratio. Nanoparticles formed by carbon nanotubes, nanoscale zeolites, dendrimer enzymes, metallic or metal oxides are other inorganic nanomaterials which are broadly used to remove heavy metal ions in wastewater treatment. However, nano-sized metals or metal oxides provide high surface area and specific affinity. Besides, these metal oxides possess minimal environmental impact and low solubility, and no secondary pollution have been adopted as sorbents to remove heavy metals from the polluted sites. The use of nanoparticles in enzyme-mediated remediation technology is gradually gaining around because they provide a biocompatible and an inert microenvironment, which is least interfering with the native properties of the enzyme and helps in retaining their biological activities. However, a choice of nanomaterials for the remediation process is a significant step as they may be dangerous to the microorganisms required in the remediation process. So, next coming to a role of biotechnology in bioremediation. Human footprint has created enormous environmental contaminants over the past century, including organic molecules from fuel and chemical spills. To overcome these problems is since long the use of microbes and plants for remediation has been explored as non-invasive, cost-effective, and environmental friendly options to clean up contamination sites. Among the organisms utilized for bioremediation, microalgae have been widely utilized to treat wastewaters and bioremoval of heavy metal ions and are considered as environmentally and economically sustainable method to remove these toxic metals from wastewaters. Fungi have also emerged as potential biocatalysts to remove heavy metals from aqueous solution and transform them into less toxic compounds. Several fungi are there, like we can see here pictures of Klebsiella oxytoca, Alasterella species, and next is the Stachybotrys species, Flabia species. This is the Flabia species, and Pleurotus pulmonarius, Botyrosperia rhodina, which they show a highly efficient metal binding potential. Even though these organisms have been used with certain levels of success, the development of the recombinant DNA technology demonstrated that the desirable characteristics can be manipulated and improved in diverse living bodies, especially plants. Using recombinant DNA technology, control of target genes, bringing unimagined advancement in the use of plants can benefit the environment. So, coming to a nutshell about biotechnology, these microorganisms grow in the toxic compounds and help them to convert to non-toxic ones. Next, coming to heavy metals. This is a very toxic compound which is released into the environment and is persistent as it poses a severe threat to organisms exposed to high levels of such pollutants. Metals are essential to the biological functions of plants and animals, but at elevated levels, they interfere with metabolic reactions in systems of organisms. Toxic heavy metals like lead, cadmium, mercury, chromium, zinc, uranium, selenium, silver, gold, nickel, arsenic, which are not useful to plants but are capable of reducing plant growth due to reduced photosynthetic activities, plant mineral nutrition, and reduced activity of essential enzymes. Heavy metals are cytotoxic at low concentrations and could lead to cancer in humans. These toxic metals could accumulate in the body when consumed in contaminated food through the food chain and become health risks to living organisms, which causes oxidative stress and unevenness involving the production of free radicals and the capacity of cells to eradicate them or repair the damage. This leads to base damage through formation of ROS, means reactive oxygen species, which includes hydrogen peroxide as well as breakage of the DNA molecule. Next comes into the picture is these heavy metal toxicity increases the production of ROS by decreasing the antioxidant systems like glutathione superoxide dismutase, etc., which protect cells. These are essential for cells metabolism. If this continues, the normal functioning of the organism is affected and it may invariably lead to cell death. Dear participants, this FTP is an elementary FTP. So I just want to give you a roughly knowledge about the concept of bioremediation, its applications, how important it is. Next, coming to the harmful properties of heavy metals discussed in the earlier slide, we'll just vividly know about that. The non-biodegradability of heavy metals makes it hard to remove them from the contaminated biological tissues. And this is a major concern for global health because of their lethal nature. These heavy metals like cobalt, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum are required in small quantities for the survival of living organisms, but at higher concentrations, they become very much harmful to us. These heavy metals are hazardous and contaminate the environment and adversely affect also the quality of soil, crop production, as well as public health. These pollutants are major sources of life-threatening degenerative diseases affecting humans like cancer, Alzheimer's disease, atherosclerosis, Parkinson's disease, etc. The degree of toxicity of each metal is determined by the duration of exposure, how long it takes to decompose, as well as adsorbed doses by the organisms, and how much we absorb in our food from our environment. So, among these organisms greatly affected by heavy metal toxicity are plants, as their normal physiological activities are severely hampered. For example, the process of respiration, photosynthesis, electron transport chain, and cell divisor are negatively affected by elevated levels of heavy metals, as seen in various laboratory experiments. Moreover, high metal toxicity inhibits cytoplasmic enzymes in plant cells and causes damage to cell structures due to oxidative stress, which consequently affects plant growth and metabolism. Exposure of the body to high levels of lead could cause serious health complications such as lack of coordination and paralysis that results in severe exposure to internal organs of the body like kidney, liver, and heart. And coming to in general, arsenic is the most common cause of acute heavy metal poisoning in adults as well as children, which could result in respiratory diseases such as reduced pulmonary function, uh, hearing, and also sometimes weakness of muscles. It accumulates in the cells and microbes, uh, which gets converted to methyl mercury in the microbes and becomes detrimental to aquatic lives. So, consumption of fish and other aquatic animals by man can cause the transfer of this toxic mercury to human beings. Due to detrimental effects of these metals, efforts are needed to be effectively eradicate them from the environment and stabilize the ecosystem. Next, coming to classification of bioremediation. So, as in the introduction, we had said that we can take the technology outside the lab and apply it there, or we can take the contaminated material into our lab and treat them there. So, depending upon that, it is divided into two: in situ bioremediation and ex situ bioremediation. In situ bioremediation involves the addition of gases, nutrients, or microbes into soil in order to extract those pollutants. So often, the contaminants include spills from underground pipes or buried wastes, water until the concentration of pollutants decreases. See, this picture denotes how in the until this how where this microbes are being injected into the soil, and this helps in cleaning the water or treatmenting the wastewater. Injecting oxygen detoxifies the pollutants typically to carbon dioxide and water. The chart which you can see in the above, it shows is the graph for concentration of pollutants over several weeks or months. So how it is decreasing. So this happens in situ bioremediation. Now coming to classification of in situ bioremediation. These In situ bioremediation is most effective in the soil and water, as these biomes always have high chance of being fully contaminated by contaminants and toxins. This process is usually employed in underground places like underground petroleum tanks, where there is a accumulation of wastewaters. The natural ability of microorganisms to degrade the contaminants should be examined and tested at laboratory. And in field of intrinsic bioremediation, there are several conditions of a site that promotes it. These conditions are flow of groundwater throughout the year. Next is the carbonate minerals are required to buffer acidity produced during this degradation. Dispense of the electron acceptors and nutrients for bacterial growth, and other environmental factors like pH, concentration, temperature, and nutrient availability, which decides that whether the biotransformation by the microorganisms will take place or not. So despite these good results, it may not be suitable when these site conditions are not matching with the microbial growth requirement. As in these conditions, a high concentration of high concentration of contaminants is required for the in situ bioremediation to activate the microbial effect. Now coming to classify the two types of in situ bioremediation. It is intrinsic in situ bioremediation and engineered in situ bioremediation. So in the engineered in situ bioremediation, this process, this biotransformation is accelerated by enhancing the growth of microorganisms under optimum physicochemical growth conditions. Oxygen and electron acceptors, nutrients, these increase microbial growth in surface, and these are injected into the contaminated soil or water. Next, coming to advantages and disadvantages of in situ bioremediation. So for this, we do not require excavation of contaminated soils, take them to lab. Okay, so it is not so expensive, and also the chances of contaminating other sites decreases. In this method, there is a possibility of treating large amount of soil at a time. But the disadvantage is that it is a slow process and is difficult to manage. It also requires uncompacted soil um, so that the microorganisms could flourish there. Next, coming to ex situ bioremediation. This includes elimination of waste materials and their collection from the contaminated site or place to assist microbial degradation, where it is not possible to help to increase the microbial growth. We can take the waste material and their collection to a contaminated site. This includes most of the demerits and limitations. And it is a very expensive process transferring all those things due to costs associated with solid handling process like excavation, screening and fractionation, mixing, homogenizing and final disposal. So the contaminated material, it may be either in liquid form or solid form. The time frame of the ex situ bioremediation is also very long, 60 to 90 days, hence faster than in situ bioremediation. So being an expensive way, it is also a little bit fast in as we are doing it on our laboratory in a in a in laboratory conditions. We can virtually accelerate the microbial growth. So on the basis of contaminated and parts under treatment, ex situ bioremediation is classified into two types: solid phase system and slurry phase system. Coming to solid phase system, It is of three types: land farming, composting, and biopiles. During land farming, the waste materials are typically placed as a layer on the ground surface with variable thickness. This is the picture of land farming. The waste is then tilled and amended with nutrients to enhance biodegradation by a naturally occurring bacteria. Fertilizers like urea and triple superphosphate are used to provide nitrogen and phosphate necessary for biodegradation. Reduction in hydrocarbon concentrations can be expected within a span of week to months. Reduction in hydrocarbon concentrations can be expected as it requires some weeks to months depending on the initial concentration and composition of hydrocarbons or the waste material it contains. The soil conditions also, which is required for biodegradation. Once your cleanup goal is achieved, the treated material can be used for construction activities or like filling of agricultural purposes, disposing at a landfill, and or it can also be left in a place depending upon local regulations or any site specific considerations. So land farming is a low cost technology. It requires large land area for treatment. It may not be effective for highly impacted soils or soils impacted with severely degraded hydrocarbons. Next, coming to composting. As we all know this, and we are also doing in our household, composting is a very good process of remediating these waste materials in our houses to help our plants grow. So this also involves the combining of contaminated soils with other organic materials such as manure and agricultural wastes. This adds up to the microbial flora of the soil and helps the plant to grow healthier. Next, coming to biopiles. This is a full-scale technology in which the excavated soils are piled and typically constructed in a treatment area that consists of a leachate collection and aeration system. It is commonly applied to reduce concentrations of petroleum components in soils through utilizing the process of biodegradation. See this structure where there is a leachate collection and there is a aeration. So this leachate collection provides the poorhouse of for microorganisms to be supplied to the soil for biotransformation, and the aeration and the aeration part helps them to make the soil porous. Next, coming to the limitations for biopiling. Excavation of contaminated soils is required, and this is an immediate requirement. And the treatability testing should be performed to establish the biodegradability of contaminants and appropriate oxidation and nutrient loading rates. So how much the method is reproducible, this tends to be a limitation for biopiling method. It is a static treatment process and consequently may result in less uniform treatment of the soil with a process that involves periodic mixing. Next, coming to the slurry phase. So this slurry phase bioremediation it's a rapid process as compared to the other treatment processes. The contaminated soil is combined with water and other additives in a large tank called as a bioreactor, and the nutrients or oxygen are added into it, which contributes to optimum growth of the microorganisms so that they can transform the waste material. This slurry phase system includes bioreactors, bioventing, biosparging, and bioaugmentation. Next, coming to bioreactors and bioventing. Bioreactors, as I said, the soil and water are pumped into a contaminated phase and they are supposed to engineered containment systems by microbes. This degradation of bioreactor is generally greater than the in situ one, because the environment is more controllable and predictable here, as it was not in the in situ bioremediation. Now coming to bioventing. This method involves supply of air to soil to be treated using a combination of pumps and blowers. Using these devices, vacuum is applied to the target area while continuously injecting low volumes of air. This procedure of bioventing is aimed at stimulating in situ aerobic degradation of contaminants, and for its successful functioning, nutrients are often required to be added, and adequate water levels must be present in the unsaturated zone to support microbial degradative activity. This method is extensively used for in situ remediation of unsaturated soils contaminated by petroleum hydrocarbons. It is also sometimes combined with other techniques called soil vapor extraction for faster remediation and highly of the very more contaminated sites. Next, coming to biosparging and bioaugmentation. Biosparging involves the injection of air under pressure below the water table. This is the water. So below the water table, we have to inject air so as to increase the groundwater oxygen concentrations and enhance the rate of biological degradation of contaminants by naturally occurring bacteria. So next, coming to bioaugmentation. Bioaugmentation frequently involves adding microbes and organisms to strengthen the same in waste to allow them to take over and decontaminate the area. So the term, as it says, bioaugment. So it will augment, or it will help in speeding up the process by adding microbes and organisms, so that the biotransformation process doesn't slow at a stage. Next, coming to biosynthesis of nanoparticles. See, these are termed as mainly nanofactories. The bacteria, the fungi, the plants, these are all green nanofactories. These nanoparticles can be synthesized by green approaches, mainly by utilizing microbes, which is an efficient way to exploit microorganisms as convenient, as we say, nanofactories. Recently, phytonanotechnology has provided new avenues for the synthesis of nanoparticles, and it is an eco-friendly, simple, rapid, stable, and cost-effective method. So the phytonanotechnology has its own advantages, including biocompatibility, adaptability, and the medical applicability of integrating these nanoparticles utilizing our universal solvent water as a reducing medium. In this way, the plant-derived nanoparticles produced by promptly accessible plant materials and the non-toxic nature of plants are appropriate for satisfying the high demand for nanoparticles with applications in the biomedical and environmental areas. Recently, gold and silver nanoparticles were effectively integrated utilizing the leaf and root extracts from the medicinal herbal plant Panax ginseng. I'm saying an example of a plant like Panax ginseng, from which by utilizing with silver and gold nanoparticles, we can effectively integrate for making these nanoparticles usable in our technology. So next, this is a brief table, I can say, where these are the metal nanoparticles, and it's a few examples of plants which is used for gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. These metal nanoparticles can be combined with um, plants for biosynthesis of bio-nanoparticles. This is a selection of microorganisms used to synthesize bio-nanoparticles. So what will be the advantage? So that means how fast it will occur, how much the reproducibility will raise. This is a small table which helps to select microorganisms depending upon the utilization. Next, coming to the heart of this topic, is the biotechnological approach for phytoremediation. Phytoremediation mainly deal with cleanup of organic pollutants and heavy metal contaminants using plants and rhizosporic microorganisms. It is inexpensive, eco-friendly, and an efficient means of restoration of polluted environments, especially those that of heavy metals. The quantity of metal contaminant in the soil as well as the ability of plants to aggressively take up these metals from the soil determine the success of phytoremediation at any polluted site. Plants utilized in phytoremediation are the hyperaccumulators with a very high metal accumulation potential. So those type of plants are really used in this approach. And a little biomass efficiency with uh, we can utilize this whose total biomass yield is substantially higher under fast growing species, so their biotransformation rate will also be faster. Next, coming to phytoextraction. It involves the uptake and movement of metal pollutants in the soil through plant roots into above ground components and of the plants, which is based on the mechanism of hyperaccumulation. Hyperaccumulator plants take up metals in large quantities from contaminated soils and then transport and accumulate them in organs above the ground at concentrations of about 100 to 1000 times higher than those found in non-hyperaccumulating species. So these type of species with hyperaccumulation are mainly suitable for phytoremediation, and they are usually found growing in areas with long-lasting metal contamination soil over time and produce abundant biomass that can easily be harvested. So these hyperaccumulators of some metals and the popular ones are from number of families we can found like family Brassiaceae, Caryophyllaceae, Violaceae, Fabaceae, Euphobiaceae, Lamiaceae, Asteraceae, Cyperaceae, and Poaceae, and also Flacotiaceae, and many others are also there. We have also seen in the previous table some plants, some families. So these plants are unique because of the following characteristics. Why? They have a much greater capacity to take up these heavy metals for biotransformation from the soil. And secondly, they have also enhanced root to shoot location of metal ions. The greater ability to detoxify and sequester extremely large amount of heavy metals in the shoots, and the ability to grow fast, and a profuse root system also. This profuse root system also helps in the absorption. It increases the surface area. So next, coming to phytofiltration. It could be in any of the three forms of rhizofiltration. The rhizofiltration, we can say it occurs in the use of the plant roots. Next, the three forms are mainly rhizofiltration, blastofiltration by the use of seedlings, and colofiltration. This is the use of excised plant shoots. So this topic is mainly related to cleanup of polluted environments using plant roots or seedlings from aqueous wastes. For the effective use of phytofiltration as a phytoremediation technique, More studies have to be carried out to identify the parts of the plant that would be more efficient in accumulating the metal contaminants, which is an essential for the use of this technique in bioremediation. So next, coming to phytostimulation. What is phytostimulation? Is the enhancement of microbial activity to degrade these organic contaminants by exudates from plant roots. Ethylene at very low concentration stimulates root elongation, but at high levels, it also inhibits cell division and DNA synthesis. These can be prevented by reducing ethylene concentration in plants using enzyme like 1-aminocyclopropane 1-carboxylase deaminase, which reduces abiotic stress in plants by balancing the ethylene level production. This enzyme is linked with plant roots and using exudates by plants as carbon and energy sources to degrade these metal contaminants. Next, coming to another process, the phytostabilization. It involves the use of plant roots. Phytostabilization involves the use of plant roots to absorb pollutants from the soil and retain them within the rhizosphere and get separated and stabilized, rendering them harmless and preventing the pollutants spreading from the environment. So this is a better alternative of capturing metals in situ because the pollutants are not taken up into tissues of the plants and do not also spread in the environment. It mainly focuses on heavy metal sequestration only within the rhizosphere. Next, coming to phytovolatilization. It deals with removal of soil contaminants by plants which are readily changed into vapor, as its name is phytovolatilization, and consequently released into the atmosphere. Like we can take the example of tobacco plants. They have the ability to accumulate highly toxic methyl mercury from mercury contaminated sites and transform to a less toxic chemical uh, mercury, which is in a volatile form that escapes through the leaves to the atmosphere. So these conversion of contaminants into volatile forms released during phytovolatilization is due to metabolic potentials of the plants in union with microorganisms residing in the rhizosphere. Next, is the phytodegradation process, which is the breakdown of organic contaminants into non-hazardous forms by plant enzymes. Specific enzymes are required for these like nitroreductases, dehalogenases, which are used by plants to degrade organic contaminants. These enzymes must be used at optimal conditions of temperature and pH for efficient degradation of contaminants. These degradation in the soil helps in enhancing the rhizosporic microorganisms through the process of rhizodegradation. But it is restricted only to removal of organic pollutants since heavy metals are non-biodegradable. Then last approach of the phytoremediation is rhizofiltration. This involves elimination of toxic substances or pollutants from groundwater through filtration by the roots of the plants. This process is based on the mechanism of rhizosporic accumulation by plants. Plants have the ability to take up and resist high concentrations of toxic metals such as hyperaccumulators, which are best suited for rhizofiltration. So we, in these all biotechnological approaches, we all knew very good things, but it also has its own limitations. Like the decrease in the rate at which remediation occurs, which frequently becomes insufficient as there are many pollutants at the contamination site, many variety of pollutants at the contamination site, and the accumulation and storage of pollutants in the plant materials also. So next, coming to genetic engineering of microbes. So what are these? What are these genetically modified microorganisms? These microorganisms whose genetic makeup is modified in a laboratory using genetic engineering or transgenic technology. This helps to create combinations of plant, animal, bacteria, and virus genes that do not occur in nature. Or through traditional crossbreeding methods. The increased environmental pollution led to the exploration of microbial organisms and construction of genetically engineered microbes for pollution uh, treatment through bioremediation. In the present scenario, physical and chemical strategies have been practiced for the remediation of domestic and industrial wastes, but these techniques are very much expensive and toxic to the environment also. So, involving engineered microbes can provide a much safer and cost effective strategy in comparison with other techniques. By the help of biotechnology, also, these genetically engineering of microbes can be designed and transform them with a more potent protein to overexpress the desired character. Like in bacteria, fungi, algae, they have been used to degrade oil spills, camphor, hexane, naphthalene. These all had been used in bioremediation with genetically modifications. Next, coming to what are the methods that by which we can genetically engineering of microbes can happen. So, due to eco-friendly social acceptance and lesser health hazards, the microbial bioremediation has received considerable global attention for pollution control. Moreover, with the recent advancement in biotechnology and microbiology, these genetically engineered bacteria with high ability to remove environmental pollutants are widely used in the fields of environmental restorations. So, by use of genetical engineering, we can see how the reproducibility also increases. So, it is an integrated microbiological and ecological method accompanied by field engineering designs, which are the desired features of effective in situ bioremediation of hazardous waste polluted sites by recombinant bacteria. Next, see, this is the world's strongest bacteria, uh, Deinococcus radiodurans, and it can survive the cold, severe cold, dehydration, vacuum, acid, and we also tell it as a polyextremophile for its all these habits. These bacteria can withstand extreme temperatures and drought conditions, lack of nutrients, and 1,000 times it is resistant to the radiation than a human being. So we can use these helpful bacteria for our process bioremediation. Now coming to this process, that how this bacteria helps. See this how it reduces this chromium to less mobile and less toxic engineered uh, components so that it will the chromium being an heavy metal, toxic heavy metal, is biotransformed from our environment into a less toxic form. Next, coming to this is also a method by using phytochelatins. The heavy metal detoxification by phytochelatins. These are enzymatically synthesized peptides known to involve in heavy metal detoxification and accumulation, which have been measured in plants grown at high heavy metal concentrations. So, heavy metals mainly activates an enzyme called as phytogelatin synthase, and heavy metal gelatin complexes are now established. So these complexes consequently transported through tonoplast to vacuole by ATP binding cassette and an enzyme transporter. These heavy metal is then chelated to the cytosol and by ligands such as the phytochelatins. Induction of phytogelatin synthesis by heavy metals and a large flux of enzymes is further achieved by increased activity of the metabolic enzymes. It is possible that the enzyme activation is not directed through effects of heavy metals, but due to the hydrogen peroxide produced as a result of the presence of these heavy metals. So transport of these heavy metals through the plasma membrane occurs and is results in natural resistance associated macrophage proteins activations. These are the example, a table which shows the transferred genes and target plants for phytoremediation. We can see here the plants have been applied to the expression of metal chelators with the goal of enhancing mercury for phytoremediation, like taking the example of a tobacco plant, which were genetically modified via the nuclear genome to express the PPK gene and have increased polyphosphate production and enhanced tolerance and accumulation of mercury up to 10 micrometers. So also the expression to the MARP gene we can also see in the nuclear genome of transgenic Arabidopsis thaliana plant that provided similar resistance of higher accumulation of mercury. So more recently it was reported that development of a chloroplast transforming approach to express the MT1 gene or the mouse metallothionein gene, which accumulated mercury in high concentrations in within plant cells. By using transplastomic plants, resistance up to little bit it is doubled and maintains a high chlorophyll content and biomass are obtained. Although the transgenic plants accumulated high concentration of mercury in all tissues, but the leaves accumulated up to we can say 100 nanogram of mercury, indicating active phytoremediation, translocation of mercury. So such an accumulation of mercury in plant tissues facilitates proper disposal and recycling. So we can take these transferred genes of this target plants and utilize this for phytoremediation so that the uptake increases. Next, coming to nanobioremediation. Yes, these are all the applicability of carbon particles like carbon nanotubes, dendrimers. All these are help removal of pollutants by enhancing microbial activity. And for example, these heavy metals, organic and inorganic toxins with the help of plants, fungi and microbes with the assistance of nanotechnology. This is a schematic illustration of nanobioremediation. Microorganisms are essential decomposers and nutrient cyclers in the environment and are most likely candidate species for nanobioremediation. Some bacteria and fungal species possess metabolic pathways to degrade these to benign end products. So this current efficiency of nanomicroorganism systems is sensitive to changes in environmental conditions. So this we can see the three parts. In three ways we can nanobioremediate these microorganisms, plants and animals. Next, coming to carbon nanotubes. It is an application of carbon nanoparticles. Over the past years, numerous studies have extensively been explored the carbon nanotubes as a new adsorbent for the removal of number of heavy metals from water. These carbon nanotubes have been used to remove cadmium, chromium, lead, heavy metals like nickel, copper, mercury, etc. The results of these studies confirm that CNTs are an excellent adsorbent for the removal of due to its exceptional physical and chemical properties. The applications of CNTs are not limited to electrical, electronics, sensors, thermal devices, as we had listened in the previous sessions also. Moreover, they are emerging materials for environmental remediation. These are indeed a class of materials useful for environmental applications because of their cylindrical hollow structure, large surface area, high length to radius ratio, and hydrophobic wall and surface that can be easily modified. The surface of these carbon nanotubes are hydrophobic, and so a strong preference for adsorption of hydrocarbons like hexane, benzene, cyclohexane, etc. This surface functionalization reduces in oxygen content and decreases, it reduces the hydrophobicity, increases the oxygen content and decreases specific surface area. As a result of it reduces adsorption of the non-polar hydrocarbons. So this non-polar, for this biotransformation of non-polar hydrocarbons, carbon nanotubes are a better alternative. Next, coming to nanoscale zero valent metals. This technology is in a higher demand now. It is a type of iron nanoparticle that has been employed for in situ remediations within the subsurface as a groundwater or aquifer treatment. So for the removal of environmental pollutants, zero valent metals like of iron, zinc, titanium, nickel, palladium, magnesium, aluminium, etc., have emerged as a low cost and viable chemical medium. These nanophytoremediation for degradation and removal of 2,4,6 trinitrotoluene, as you know, and other pollutants like trichloroethylene, benzene, toluene from contaminated soil is obviously more effective than either nanoremediation or phytoremediation. So this employs a new technology called NanoRem. It is the nanotechnology remediation process from lab scale to end user applications for the restoration of a clean environment. It is designed to unlock the potential of nanoremediation and support both the appropriate use of nanotechnology for in situ remediation. The highest remediation efficiency of endosulfan, an organochlorine pesticide, was achieved over 120 days of nanophytoremediation. So this is about dendrimers. Dendrimers are nano-sized, radially symmetric molecules with well-defined, homogeneous and monodisperse structures that are virtually typically symmetric with a symmetric core and an inner cell and with an outer cell. These hyper-branched molecules were first discovered by Fritz Vogel in 1978 and then by Donald Tomalia and his co-workers in the early 1980s, at the same time but independently by George R. Newcomb. The second group of synthesized macromolecules or arborols in Latin, this means trees. So dendrimers might also be called as cascade molecules. These are polymeric nanoparticles, which are also an application of carbon nanoparticles that consist of a biodegradable polymer that is biocompatible and non-toxic. They have been widely used for land and groundwater remediation, and for that, the main example is polypyrrole. It's considered as the most effective adsorbent material applied to absorption of toxic heavy metals from the polluted water. These polymer nanovac particles help to expand the effective solubility of a representative hydrophobic organic contaminant phenanthrene and to improve release of these phenanthrene from the contaminated aquifer material. So by this we can the biotransformation can happen by a biodegradable polymer, use of a biodegradable polymer. So this is a table which shows the nanoparticles that help in controlling pollution. This nanofiltered membrane process is a productive strategy to purify large volumes of contaminated water to high quality consumable water. During this degradation, pesticides are rarely mineralized into carbon dioxide, water, and other inorganic materials. Rather, they are just converted into transformation products. The membrane used is NF99HF. It is able to remove the regular pesticides about 90%. However, it has a smaller size, so it is easy to employ low pressure reverse osmosis and membrane to obtain satisfactory removal of protein tyrosine phosphates. So by the use of NF99HF, we can remove uh, protein tyrosine phosphates from the pesticides. These are metal nanoparticles which are used in remediation process. Metal nanoparticles like zinc, gold, copper, silver, titanium dioxide, etc. Many more also there. So what are the future prospects of these studies? So there has been an urge or demand of development of electrochemical biosensors by coupling with metallic nanomaterials like nanowires, nanorods, nanospheres, which offers distinct advantages such as high sensitivity and real-time detection of heavy metals. So as the detection will be proper, we can opt various ways of remediation. Microbial biosensors reveals potential applications in pesticide and heavy metal detection also, in which eukaryotic microorganisms have an edge over uh, prokaryotic cells. So from this, we can conclude that additional advantages enter with the application of nanotechnology in the field of bioremediation of contaminated sites. And simultaneously, this technology is also being used in different fields like agriculture in the form of nanofertilizer, decontamination of organic wastes, and to water purification systems. The various types of nanoparticles are being employed to obtain productive microbial degradation of pollutants in the environment, which act upon a number of bioremediation steps that otherwise hinder the process and impose kinetic limitations on the system. So we'll also have a better understanding of the environmental fate of these nanoparticles that needs to be investigated before they are applied in a field scale. The main reason of applicability of this nanotechnology will depend upon the selection of low cost, environmentally safe nanotechnology with another diverse spectrum of human life, such as biomedicine, agriculture, and bioremediation too. And last, I would say thank you.